Rain hammered the windshield as Emily Carter drove down the nearly deserted highway. Her old sedan rattled against the gusts of wind, wipers struggling to keep up with the storm. She had stayed late at the diner to cover a double shift, and now every mile felt heavier. She just wanted to get home, dry, and out of her tired shoes. Then she saw it. A dark figure stood on the shoulder of the road, waving one arm. The headlights caught a sleek black car angled awkwardly into the ditch. For a moment, Emily's instincts screamed at her to keep driving. It was late. The storm was bad. She was alone. Every safety rule she had ever been told said don't stop. But she pressed the brake anyway. The figure turned toward her beams. He was tall, drenched, his shirt plastered to his chest. She couldn't see much of his face through the rain, only the sharp outline of his jaw. Against all better judgment, Emily pulled over. She lowered her window just a crack. "Are you okay?" she called, raising her voice above the storm. The man stepped closer. The glare from her headlights finally revealed him, and Emily's stomach dropped. She had seen that face before, on magazine covers, business reports, even whispered about at the diner. Alexander Kane, the billionaire no one dared cross. His reputation was legendary in the city. Ruthless in boardrooms, cold in interviews. Rumors said he had ruined competitors without blinking. People called him the Wolf of Ashbourne because of how he shredded anyone who stood in his way. And now he was standing in the rain, soaked and stranded, looking very much like a man who'd been pulled out of his fortress and forced into the ordinary world. Emily froze. Every instinct told her to drive off, but his eyes, piercing gray, unreadable, locked on hers. "My car skidded into the ditch," he said, his voice deep, steady despite the storm. "Phone's dead. I need a ride." The words carried no plea, no weakness. Just command. Emily's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I don't usually pick up strangers." "Then don't think of me as a stranger," Alexander said flatly. "Think of me as a man standing in the middle of a storm who doesn't intend to freeze to death tonight." Her heart thudded. She could leave him there. It wasn't her problem. But something in the way he stood, shoulders squared, pride intact despite the circumstances, pulled at her. Against her better judgment, she unlocked the passenger door. "Fine," she muttered, "but just until the next town." He slid in, bringing the rain with him. The cabin instantly felt smaller, his presence commanding even in silence. Emily focused on the road, trying not to look at him. She could feel his gaze though, heavy, assessing. "You know who I am," he said after a long stretch of quiet. Her fingers twitched on the wheel. "Everyone knows who you are. Yet you still stopped. Would you rather I hadn't?" She shot back before she could stop herself. To her surprise, a flicker of amusement touched his mouth. It wasn't quite a smile, more like a ghost of one. Most people would have kept driving. Fear has its uses. Emily swallowed. "I don't scare that easily." Another silence followed, filled only by the drumming rain. But she could feel the air between them shift. They drove for miles. The storm worsened, forcing Emily to slow down. The highway wound through a patch of forest, the trees swaying violently. Then, without warning, something darted across the road. Emily gasped and swerved. The car fishtail-ed. She fought the wheel, but the tires slid on slick asphalt. "Hold it steady," Alexander's voice cut in, sharp and calm. His hand shot out, gripping the wheel with hers. Together they straightened the car, the tires catching traction again. Breathing hard, Emily pulled over to the shoulder. Her knuckles were white against the wheel. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his tone different now. Less commanding. More human. "No," she whispered. "Just shaken." For a moment they sat in silence, rain pounding the roof. His hand lingered near hers, not quite touching, but close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. Finally, she gathered her breath and pulled back onto the road. They reached the lights of a small town 20 minutes later. Emily slowed near a gas station. "This is as far as I take you." Alexander didn't move. Instead, he studied her, his gray eyes steady. "What's your name?" She hesitated. "Emily." "Emily." He repeated it like it mattered. Then, after a pause, "You could have driven past me. Why didn't you?" The question caught her off guard. "Because you looked like you needed help." His expression shifted, almost imperceptibly. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a black card, placing it on the console. "For your trouble." Emily glanced at it. A platinum business card. Heavy, sleek. "I don't want your money." He leaned back, watching her with interest. "Everyone wants my money." "Well, I'm not everyone." She shoved the card back toward him. Something flickered in his gaze. Surprise, maybe even respect. Slowly, he pocketed it. "Drive me to the Ashbourne Hotel," he said finally. Emily stiffened. That was nearly 40 minutes away. She shook her head. "That wasn't the deal, Emily," he said softly, but with that same weight in his voice. "If you leave me here, I'll still find a way back. But I'd prefer it be with you." The storm outside cracked with thunder, as if underlining his words. Against her own logic, against every warning bell in her head, Emily kept driving. The silence between them grew heavier, charged with something unspoken. Every time she stole a glance, she caught the faintest outline of his jaw, the rainwater still glistening in his hair. He didn't look untouchable now. He looked real, and that scared her more than his reputation. When they finally reached the glowing lights of the Ashbourne Hotel, she pulled up to the grand entrance. Staff rushed forward with umbrellas, clearly panicked at the sight of their boss arriving like this. Alexander didn't get out immediately. Instead, he turned to her. "You didn't ask me for anything tonight," he said. "That makes you unusual." Emily forced a shrug. "Maybe I don't need anything." His eyes lingered on hers, intense, unreadable. Then, with a low voice that sent shivers down her spine, he said, "I'll see you again, Emily Carter." And with that, he was gone, swallowed by the lights of his empire. Emily gripped the wheel, her pulse racing. She told herself it didn't matter, that she'd never see him again. But somewhere deep down, she knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Emily told herself that night had been a fluke. She would go back to her shifts at the diner, back to her quiet apartment, back to pretending she hadn't seen Alexander Kane dripping wet and human for the first time in his life. But 2 days later, he walked into the diner. The bell above the door jingled, and every head turned. Men in suits rarely came here, let alone that man. His presence filled the room like thunder. The other waitresses froze mid-step, customers whispered, and Emily nearly dropped the coffee pot in her hands. Alexander Kane slid into a booth at the far corner, his sharp gray eyes fixed on her as though she were the only person in the room. Emily's stomach tightened. She thought about ducking into the kitchen, letting someone else serve him. But something told her he wouldn't allow it. So she walked over, pen and notepad in hand, pretending her knees weren't trembling. "What'll it be?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. His lips curved the slightest bit. "Black coffee, and whatever you recommend." "You don't seem like the type to take recommendations. From most people, no. From you, yes." The words unsettled her. He wasn't flirting. Not exactly. His tone was too deliberate, too measured, like he was studying her reaction. Emily scribbled the order and hurried back to the counter, trying to ignore the curious stares from her coworkers. When she brought the coffee, he didn't touch it immediately. Instead, he leaned forward. "You didn't tell anyone, did you?" Her brow furrowed. "Tell them what? That you picked me up on the highway?" "No," she said quickly. "Why would I?" His gaze lingered, searching. Finally, he nodded once, as if satisfied. "You're different, Emily." She crossed her arms. "You don't even know me." "I know enough. Most people I meet want something. Money, power, a headline. You gave me a ride and refused my card. That doesn't happen." Emily looked away, heat rising to her cheeks. "Maybe I just don't like being told what to do." A faint smile ghosted his lips. "That, I can respect." Before she could answer, the diner door opened again. 2 men in tailored suits walked in, scanning the room. They headed straight for Alexander's booth. Emily stepped back instinctively. The taller of the 2 men leaned down to murmur something to Alexander. His jaw tightened, but his expression stayed calm. "Excuse me," Alexander said, standing. He slipped on his coat and looked at her. "Dinner. Tomorrow night. Ashbourne Hotel, 7. Emily blinked. That wasn't a question. It wasn't meant to be. He paused, eyes locking on hers. Say yes. She should have said no. Every logical bone in her body screamed at her to stay far away. But something in his gaze, intense, magnetic, pulled her in. Fine, she muttered. Alexander's smirk was brief but satisfied. Then he walked out, his men close behind. The diner buzzed with whispers long after he left, but Emily barely heard them. All she could hear was the thundering of her own heart. The next evening, Emily stood in front of the Ashbourne Hotel's grand entrance, nerves coiling in her stomach. She had borrowed a simple black dress from her friend, brushed her hair until it shone, and still felt completely out of place. The doorman opened the massive glass doors as if he had been expecting her. Inside, crystal chandeliers glowed, and polished marble floors reflected her hesitant steps. Then she saw him. Alexander Kane waited at the base of the staircase, dressed in a charcoal suit that fit him like armor. His presence was commanding as ever, but when his eyes found hers, something softened. "You came," he said simply. "I'm still not sure why. Honesty looks good on you." He offered his arm, and after a hesitant pause, she took it. Dinner was in a private dining room, candlelit and quiet. A single table set for two. Emily tried not to stare as the waiter poured wine. "You really don't do casual, do you?" His eyes held hers. "No, I don't." She sipped water instead of wine, kneading her head clear. "Why me, Alexander? You could have anyone." He leaned back, studying her. "Because you didn't want anything from me. You weren't afraid to argue. You treated me like a man, not a headline. That's rare." She shook her head. "You don't even know if you like me. Maybe I'm difficult. Maybe I'll tell you no." "Good," he said evenly. "I don't want someone who always says yes." For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Then Emily's curiosity broke through her nerves. "Why were you alone on that road?" she asked. His jaw tightened. "Business meeting. Went south. I left without security." "You? Without security?" A shadow flickered across his eyes. "Sometimes, even I need to disappear. But that night, I miscalculated." Emily leaned forward. "You don't have to tell me, but it sounded like more than just a car in a ditch." Alexander's gaze darkened. "There are people who would rather see me ruined. People I've crossed." He paused. "You put yourself in danger stopping for me." Her breath caught. "Danger? From who?" He didn't answer. Instead, his hand brushed across the table, grazing hers. "That's why you shouldn't see me again." Her heart stuttered. "Then why invite me here?" His voice dropped, quiet but fierce. "Because I couldn't stop thinking about you." The room felt suddenly smaller, the air between them charged. Emily's pulse raced as his fingers slowly closed over hers. Before she could respond, the door burst open. One of his men stepped in, face tense. "Sir, we have a problem." Alexander's hand tightened around hers briefly before he stood. "Stay here," he ordered. Emily rose too. "No, if this is because of me." "It's not because of you," he cut in, his voice firm. "But it could affect you if you're near me." Her throat went dry. "Then maybe I should go." He turned, his expression torn between command and vulnerability. "Emily." He stopped, then said quietly, "If you walk away now, I'll understand. But if you stay, you won't be just some girl who gave me a ride. You'll be part of my world. And my world is dangerous." Emily's chest ached. She should have left. But instead, she took a steadying breath and said, "Then I guess I'll stay." The next hours blurred. Alexander's men ushered them through back corridors of the hotel, away from prying eyes. Emily didn't know the details, only that someone had been following him. A rival, a threat. Finally, safe inside a private suite high above the city, Alexander poured her water and set it gently in front of her. "I'm sorry," he said, and for the first time, he looked almost tired. "I wanted tonight to be simple." Emily managed a faint smile. "You don't seem like the simple type." For the first time, he laughed, low, genuine, and startlingly warm. The sound tugged something deep inside her. "You're right," he admitted. "But with you, I want to be." Silence stretched between them, softer this time. Emily searched his face, the man beneath the legend. The ruthless billionaire everyone feared, who now looked at her like she was the only safe thing he knew. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "You scare people, Alexander." His gray eyes met hers, unflinching. "Do I scare you?" She swallowed hard. "Not anymore." Something shifted then. He stepped closer, slowly, giving her every chance to move away. She didn't. When his lips brushed hers, Tentative at first, the world outside vanished. It wasn't the kiss of a man used to taking whatever he wanted. It was careful, searching, as though he wasn't sure she'd let him stay. When they finally broke apart, Emily's heart raced, her cheeks flushed. "You should know what you're getting into," he said softly. "I'm not an easy man. But if you stay, I won't let anyone hurt you." Emily smiled faintly, her fear dissolving into something stronger. "Then I'll take my chances." Days turned into weeks. Emily found herself swept into Alexander's orbit, yet he never treated her like a possession. He took her to dinners, yes, but also to quiet rooftops, where they shared stories under the stars. He showed her corners of the city no one else saw. And slowly, she saw the truth. The ruthless billionaire was a man who had built walls so high, no one had dared climb them. Until her. One evening, as they stood overlooking the skyline, he turned to her. "You changed something in me, Emily. I don't want to be the man everyone fears anymore." She touched his hand, her voice steady. "Then don't be. Start with me." For the first time, Alexander Kane's guarded expression broke. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the one anchor he had left in the storm. And Emily knew, in that moment, that stopping for a stranger on a rainy road had been the beginning of the rest of her life.